to protest and rally. You saw children and you saw people who are probably closer to 100 years of age, walking through streets, going to the parks, and asking other members of Congress, have you forgotten about the people that sent you to Congress? Well, I want to say, as we are standing here in the House of Representatives, that New York, that Michigan, that Texas, that Chicago has members of Congress who are unwilling to accept the idea that we would slash the very same programs that we promised to protect for the American people. And so today, I'm grateful that I get to be here with members of Congress, not just from New York, but also from with a colleague of mine who continues to ring the alarm for the safety net programs that our constituents here and in Michigan need and deserve. And so I'd like to yield for as much time as she needs to the gentlewoman from Michigan, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib.
Thank you so much for the leadership, Congresswoman Ramirez, who has led with her own lived experiences and her compassion, that she leads with compassion, which I think is sometimes missing here in this chamber. But Republicans are advancing, as we all know, a budget that includes $880 billion in cuts to Medicaid to pay for tax breaks for billionaires. These are folks that do not fully understand what it means to live paycheck by paycheck. 60% of our residents in our country live paycheck to paycheck. Just so we're clear, the $880 billion cut to Medicaid, this is the largest Medicaid cut in American history. 72 million people rely on Medicaid for health care in our nation, including 40% of people in Speaker Johnson's own district. For families, seniors, and people with disabilities who rely on Medicaid, it is a difference between life and death, Mr. Speaker. But right now, the future of Medicaid is under threat. I've heard many of my Republican colleagues in this chamber try to gaslight the American people and claim that the budget does not make cuts to Medicaid. Well, Senator Hawley, as we know, just offered an amendment to the same legislation right now that came through this chamber to strip the $880 billion in Medicaid cuts out of that bill. And it was voted down by members of his own party. The amendment literally said, quote, to strike the section related to reconciliation instructions to the Committee on Energy and Commerce of the House of Representatives to cut $880 billion from Medicaid. And your Republican colleagues in the Senate voted it down. So let's be honest with the American people. If you're going to cut their health care, be honest about it. Don't gaslight and try to pretend. But those who rely on Medicaid aren't just a number. They're our neighbors, they're our friends, they're our families. They depend on Medicaid for health services, treatment, medication. They simply cannot afford due to our broken health care system. Make no mistake, Republicans want to give away trillions of dollars, Mr. Speaker, let's be honest, to the richest people in our nation, like Elon Musk and all of President Trump's friends, and let children and seniors die from the lack of health care coverage. But you know, as the chair of the Congressional Mamas Caucus, I need to bring this to light, because this is important when we talk about Medicaid. You know, Black Maternal Health Week begins on April 11th, Mr. Chair. And Michigan has one of the highest Black maternal health rates in our nation. Medicaid plays a critical role in supporting maternal health, covering a significant portion of births in our country, and providing access to health care for pregnant women, postpartum individuals, including prenatal care, Mr. Speaker, and postpartum services. So Black women, we know, are 3 times higher, are more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than white women. And this is absolutely unacceptable. And we must address it at the federal level. But here we are, Mr. Speaker, here we are, because we have systems right in place, institutions that have failed our folks, but here we are saying, you know what, we're also going to take away your health care coverage. Cutting Medicaid, again, is going to be a life or death situation for our families, including women, birthing women. It's a result, of course, we know of different systems, of broken systems, but at this moment, when we know we have a crisis in infant mortality, we have a crisis in Black maternal health, we have a crisis in our healthcare system. It's a broken system. It's sick care, not health care. And here we are, watching again folks choose billionaires over the people that they elected, the people that elected them. we must raise our voices, and I'm glad and so incredibly happy to be serving with my sister in service, Representative Ramirez. We must raise our voice again because we have to defeat this dangerous Republican budget. Again, our residents deserve better. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Congresswoman Tlaib. You're absolutely right. Our constituents, in fact, do deserve better. You know, as I go back to the district and I look at the emails and the phone calls that are coming through, our constituents are saying, what are you doing to defend me? What are you doing to protect the programs that we depend on to stay alive? You need to do more. And one of the things that we have said in our town halls, on the calls, on the emails, as constituents come to DC demanding that we protect these critical programs, is that we have to use every single opportunity. Be in committee, be in the conversations we're having with colleagues, and every moment we can get to the House floor and talk about what's at stake in this precise moment. We have to make sure that everyone hears that we are doing everything we can to protect these critical programs, because many of our constituents in this moment are feeling that they're being gaslighted by the very same people that send them to Congress. And so it's important to hear from the champions that are taking a stand. And with us today, I also get to be with one of our newer members of Congress, someone that yields from the great state of Texas, where there are champions for justice who are fighting to protect Social Security, who are fighting to protect Medicaid, who are fighting to protect the very same programs that are critical and have made this country great. And so I would like to yield to the gentlewoman from Texas, Congresswoman Johnson.
I thank you so much. I want to thank the gentlewoman for yielding and hosting this important special order hour on a topic that impacts many of my constituents in North Texas. Since day one, the Trump administration has targeted essential social services that make government unreliable for all Americans. Veterans, people with disabilities, seniors, our children, all of these people and more rely on government to survive, and all President Trump wants to do is cut, cut, and cut. Let's call it what it is. It's a full-on assault of the most essential lifelines millions of Americans count on, especially Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, that are in the crosshairs of this administration. The Trump administration and Republicans in this House are pushing cuts to the programs that Texas rely on every day. These aren't just numbers in a budget. They are the difference between stability and catastrophe for hundreds of thousands of my constituents. In Texas alone, more than 4 million people rely on Medicaid for health care, including half of the children in our state. Now, let me remind you, this is a state of 32 million people. Half of the children in our state rely on Medicaid. 1 out of every 2 kids in Texas. So when Trump proposes gutting it, he's not just slashing spending, he's taking away critical health care from children, from seniors in nursing homes, and people with disabilities who depend on it to survive. You know, today in the Capitol, one of my dear friends is here visiting who runs a hospice company. They provide dignity of care to people at the end of their life, necessary comfort for families as they're trying to deal with these situations. End-of-life care is the most expensive part of our healthcare system. But companies like hospice companies and they provide a necessary but much more affordable access to the end of life with dignity for families. And they rely on Medicaid. They rely on Medicare to stay in business, that help families and so many people in need. We still have to even talk about Social Security. Over 4 million Texans, retirees, veterans, widows, people with disabilities rely on Social Security to keep the lights on, keep food on the table, and pay their bills. It's not a luxury. It's a promise this country made to working people. If you pay in, you can retire with dignity. But Trump's budget says otherwise. He's talking about entitlement reform. That's Washington speak for cuts. Cuts that would hit rural communities, communities of color, and low-income seniors the hardest. Let me be crystal clear. Texas already ranks 43rd in the nation in access to health care. It's a statistic I'm not proud of from my state. We lead the nation in uninsured adults. You know, we also lead the nation in maternal mortality and infant mortality. Two statistics the Republicans in our state should be embarrassed of. And now Trump and Republicans want to make it worse. It's cruel, it's reckless, and it's dead wrong. This isn't about balancing a budget, it is about priorities. Donald Trump's priorities are tax breaks for his buddies, while working families are told to tighten their belts. We should be expanding care, not slashing it. We should be protecting retirement security, not playing games with the futures of people who work their entire lives. Texas families are watching, and we will not let this administration destroy the programs that protect our health, our security, and our basic dignity. I urge my colleagues, especially my Republican colleagues, you represent the same people I do, hard-working folks, trying to make ends meet, trying to provide a life for their kids. If you went to your town halls, you should see people standing up, speaking out. They don't want this. The people in this country don't want this. And my message to you is that Democrats are standing up. We're doing everything we can to protect you, your family, and your kids, and the right for safety, justice, and your right to pursue the American dream. Texans and all Americans deserve better. And I yield back to my colleague, Rep. Ramirez.
Thank you, Congresswoman. You're absolutely right. Our constituents deserve better. So I want to talk a little bit about what is at stake. You've heard already my colleagues talk about Medicaid. You've heard them talk about Social Security. You've heard them talk about how their constituents are living in constant fear. Well, I want to talk to you about community health centers, which also are incorporated in the Medicaid funding that my colleagues, the Republicans, want to slash. And I want to start by saying to you unapologetically and very loudly that I believe to my core that health care is a human right. No one should have to choose between getting the care they need, accessing their medication, or paying their mortgage. But I could tell you from personal experience, growing up in a family where their insurance company, the insurance company they pay into, constantly makes it difficult for them to be able to get health care. Knowing that my mom and dad have had to choose often, do they get the medication or do they pay for the mortgage? You see, my parents worked their lives in this country. And my father today has Medicare. And my mother, up until a year ago, had Medicaid because, unfortunately, the wages that she worked were not large enough, were not equitable enough. They weren't living wages. But the Medicaid system that we have, that we know isn't working for everyone, that we should be expanding, not cutting, made it difficult for my mom to continue to get Medicaid. And so I think about the challenges and the struggles that so many American people are living here. And I'll tell you that in the short tenure, we have seen that this administration has not talked about making Medicaid better. What they're talking about is cutting Medicaid. What they're talking about is announcing executive orders that target immigrants and the social service providers that work in strong immigrant communities. Immigrants that, by the way, pay into Medicaid that they never get. What they're doing is undermining local governments and local agencies who know best what their communities need. You see, community health centers exist to serve an entire community, regardless of their income, regardless of insurance status, and regardless of immigration status. And many of the services they provide, like emergency care, like vaccinations and public health outreach, serve the public good. Providing these services broadly in our communities keep us all healthy. Community health centers also make a profound economic impact on our communities, creating job creation, not taking jobs like this administration is doing, over 340,000 jobs and generating $118.4 billion in local economic activity. But Republicans have chosen to defund health care so that they can provide their billionaire bosses with more tax breaks. They want you to go without health care so that the top 1% of Americans can get a $314,000 tax cut. Let me say that again. They don't think that you deserve health care. They want to take your health care away. Frankly, let you die so that their billionaire bosses can get $314,000 in tax cuts. That's what they want to do. They claim to care for working people in our economy, but their actions show us just how terrible and in your face their hypocrisy really is. There are no other words for those who knowingly would put tax benefits for the wealthiest Americans over the working families who depend on Medicaid for their basic health care. You see, in Illinois, 772,233 adults are enrolled in the ACA Medicaid expansion. If Republicans cut Medicaid, these constituents would lose their health care. We have the obligation to remain defiant in our position that everyone, independent of citizenship status, zip code, or age, has a right to a dignified, healthy life. And now is the moment to remain united in our commitment to health care for all, courageous in our resistance, and undeterred in our fight against this administration's authoritarian agenda. And I want to talk to you about immigrants, because apparently my colleagues here do everything they possibly can to vilify them every single day. It's almost as if they forgot that their grandparents also crossed borders and shores to get here. But let me say to you, you may have forgotten your roots. You may have forgotten that your parents or your grandparents or your great-grandparents were immigrants, but I haven't. I am the proud daughter of Guatemalan immigrants, the wife of Boris, who until recently was a DACA recipient. And I am the niece of a man who has contributed to this country and paid taxes for more than 30 years and put 4 boys through college. This body considers, once again, a budget that leaves working people behind. And I want to, for a moment, talk about immigration and our economy. Because what these colleagues of mine, the Republicans, will tell you is that immigrants are taking from the American people. Immigrants are taking your jobs. Immigrants are taking your housing. They're taking. So let me clarify facts here. The reality is that Republicans are pushing for a billionaire budget that gives $4.5 billion in tax breaks to the ultra-wealthy, like, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, while cutting trillions of dollars in programs like Medicaid and SNAP. That's not immigrants doing that. That is Republicans doing that. And Republicans have the audacity to tell us that they are doing all these cuts because we are broke. Well, folks, like I said to Chairman Green in Homeland, we wouldn't be broke if the ultra-wealthy would pay their fair share. Fair taxing could fund a budget that centers working families. It could fix our tax system. It could create opportunity for policies that work for working people. And let me also say to you, immigration reform could unleash the full economic power of our immigrant communities to fully participate in a fair tax system. You see, undocumented immigrants paid $96.7 billion in state, local, and federal taxes in 2022. $96.7 billion, that's what they paid. On top of that, undocumented immigrants pay an average rate of 5.27% in federal taxes. That's higher than most of the United States' wealthiest billionaires or mega corporations. And yet, while Republicans give another billion-dollar company another tax break, they're telling us that it's immigrants who are taking from the community and from the people. Well, that's a lie. It's a lie because we understand that 23.6% of all entrepreneurs are immigrants. Some undocumented, some are legal permanent residents, and some are naturalized citizens. $1.7 trillion in spending power is what immigrants bring to this economy. So every time they tell you that immigrants are taking from us, let me be very clear, immigrants contribute every single day. As I'm wrapping up, I want to say that there are many reasons to be concerned, but it's also important to remember that there are reasons to celebrate. So I want to take a moment to recognize a reason to celebrate. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to commemorate the 111th anniversary of the village of Elmwood Park and to celebrate the 25,500 Illinois 3rd Congressional District constituents who call this village home. Elmwood Park is a wonderful place to live, to shop, and to do business. They have built unique intergovernmental and cross-sector partnerships, and I am proud that our commitment and collaboration with President Saviano, the village manager Volpe, and Senator Durbin and Duckworth have secured $13.1 million for a transformative project that included grade crossing improvements to enhance resident safety in Elmwood Park. I want to thank all the hardworking employees of the village whose public service enables residents to access critical services and programs. And I remain committed to continuing to deliver the resources our communities need to improve public safety, create well-paying jobs, and expand economic opportunity for Elmwood Park and across Illinois' 3rd Congressional District. Congratulations, Elmwood Park, for these 111 years of community. I look forward to many more years of partnership and to continuing to fight in the halls of Congress for every constituent in my district. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the order of the House of January 3rd, 2025 regarding morning hour debate not apply tomorrow.
Without objection. Announced policy of January 3rd, 2025. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Washington, Ms. Schreier, for 30 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask for unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to submit extraneous material into the record if so desired.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to open just to rise and to express my frustration and outrage with the Trump administration's reckless cuts to our Forest Service. The workforce that takes care of our forests, harvests timber, makes them resilient to wildfires, is treasured in my state of Washington, and I would say in the entire western United States. And cuts to this workforce endanger my constituents, endanger millions of Americans, and put our forests at high risk of catastrophic wildfires. I'm going to first yield to my colleague from California, George Whitesides, and I will hand you the floor for as much time as he may consume.
Thank you. Congressman Schreier, thank you. My name is George Whitesides, and I represent California's 27th Congressional District. Just 3 days after I was sworn into Congress to serve my first term this year, wildfires broke out across Southern California, forcing 200,000 people to evacuate, burning over 57,000 acres of land, damaging or destroying 18,000 homes, and taking the lives of 30 individuals. 2 weeks later, the Hughes Fire erupted in my own district near Castaic, right near where this picture behind me was taken. It forced over 30,000 people to evacuate. But compared to most, we were relatively lucky, given wind conditions and the brave work of our firefighters, many of whom were employed by the U.S. Forest Service. The fire was quickly contained. As Southern California began to emerge from the devastation and focus on rebuilding, firefighters and other fire service workers with the U.S. Forest Service were abruptly terminated by the Trump administration. Days or weeks after saving our lives, they were left out to dry with no explanation. One of these employees in my own district was Jasmine Dominguez, a GIS technician who literally mapped out the fires as they spread. I brought Jasmine as my guest to the State of the Union, where we talked about how difficult it would be for local fire chiefs to control the fires without the maps that she provided. Now we are preparing to go into another bad fire season. People are scared. If you look at the conditions on the ground in the American West, they are very concerning. Fire scientists are concerned. Firefighters are concerned. Between the January fires and the extreme dryness that we have experienced this winter, we are poised to experience earlier and more intense wildfires than before. The worst thing that we could do for our communities that have already suffered so much is to reduce our capacity to fight and contain these fires when, not if, they occur. The unconscionable and frankly offensive decision to terminate our Forest Service workers will make us less safe and more vulnerable to the natural disasters that we are guaranteed to experience. The administration may claim that firefighters were exempt from their cuts, but we know this is not true. I am in constant communication with federal wildfire community members, and here's what they tell me. Their grants have been frozen. Existing agreements with the federal government, frozen. Purchasing cards that they use to buy life-saving equipment, frozen. Hiring for fire season is often cyclical, meaning the Trump administration's earlier decision to freeze federal hiring left even our local fire stations understaffed and unprepared for the fire season that has already started. For the safety of the families and the individuals across all of our districts, and for the brave work that so many of these Forest Service employees do every day, we must speak out against these unfair terminations. And to every Forest Service worker who is laid off, and for everyone preparing to undergo even more of these so-called reductions in workforce, know that we hear you, we are with you, and we are fighting for you. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Whitesides. I would just like to echo some of those comments because I am also in the West, in Washington State, and we are seeing the risk of catastrophic wildfires increasing every year. And let me just first be clear, because all of this is being done under the guise of DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, that we all want our tax dollars to be spent wisely. And let me also be clear that the people in the 8th District of Washington State think it is a super wise investment to invest in our Forest Service that will thin the forests, prevent catastrophic wildfires, and then fight catastrophic wildfires when they occur. So I would say, and my constituents would also say, because we all choke on smoke every summer, that this is not a time to cut the Forest Service. In fact, it is a time to hire up at the Forest Service, because we need them more than ever right now. We need them for fighting fires, as I discussed, for maintaining our forests, but also for supporting recreation, maintaining roads and trails, producing timber that we all need for affordable housing, for water restoration, watershed restoration, and for more. And you know, we have heard from the administration that firefighters were exempt from the cuts. But here's the thing. About 75% of the people who were cut had firefighting training. In fact, they may have had different titles, but they had something called red cards, which meant they were ready, firefighting trained, and they leapt into action whenever wildland firefighters needed their help to work side by side with them. They're really indispensable employees. And I also want to say that the people that we're losing, many of them have had years of experience. They choose to work for the Forest Service, for the federal government, because of their passion for taking care of our public lands. They are talented, they are critical, they are experienced. And they choose to do this, frankly, for lower salaries, simply because they want to serve. These are civil servants. And now we're losing these really talented and critical staff through layoffs and now the uncertainty, and we're seeing early retirements because, I mean, frankly, given the disrespect and the uncertainty and now the impossible workload, can you imagine taking on all of the workload of your colleagues? Why would they stay? This is a very tough time to work for the federal government, especially in these dangerous jobs. I am so fortunate to represent Washington's 8th Congressional District. We have some of the most stunning nature in the country. In fact, we have the North Cascades National Park, we have Mount Rainier National Park, and we have 2 national forests stretching over 2 million acres. And that's a fifth of the national forest, approximately 10 million in Washington state. U.S. Forest Service manages these public lands. We also have agreements and rely on relationships between federal, state, and tribal organizations and governments to manage our public lands. So when you cut federal staffing, it really has ripple effects and leaves state, tribal, and local governments lacking. And so I just want to express that gratitude to U.S. Forest Service staff because they are also keeping our cherished public lands accessible for outdoor recreation. I don't know, Mr. Speaker, if you have ever been to Washington State, but if you had, you would know that outdoor recreation is our pride and joy and is what sustains us. Those beautiful springs and summers, that's what sustains us when we have the rainy fall and winter. We've already seen some of these outdoor trails, accesses closed. In fact, there's one called the Denny Creek Trailhead that's experienced closures due to these staffing shortages, and that's only going to be worse as we head into outdoor recreation season. And again, I have mentioned already the role that the Forest Service plays in wildfire mitigation, that is, thinning the forests, doing prescribed burns, doing the work that will prevent catastrophic wildfires. In my district, Fire Chief David Walker says the Forest Service is the primary firefighting force for something called the Lake Wenatchee area. It is a favorite vacation spot for Washington families. So when you gut the Forest Service's fire response operation, that means you're taking away public safety. You're taking away safety from the people who are camping in the Lake Wenatchee area. Mitigating risk in our forests has become ever more important with the increasing intensity of wildfires and the longer and longer wildfire season throughout the West. In our state, we used to see wildfire mostly in the dry part of the state, east of the Cascade Mountains. Now we see it in the entire state. We have seen devastating fires in recent years. In fact, 6 of the highest risk fire sheds in the entire country are in my district. So now is the time to strengthen our wildfire mitigation efforts, not kneecap the agency that is responsible for maintaining forest health. So firing support staff involved in wildfire response or mitigation does just as much harm as firing those that we think of as being on the front lines. They work together. I also just want to mention, imagine if you were a firefighter and you're depending on that support staff to tell you when the weather conditions change, when the winds are shifting, because that matters for your own survival as you are fighting these fires. The support staff is every bit as important. Now, we're anticipating there to be further staffing cuts right before wildfire season kicks into gear, and these reduction in force plans are being made with little forethought, no agency engagement. And so we're seeing, arbitrary firing of probationary employees in every agency and then struggling to rehire them because they've cut HR. This administration is not getting the message that every carpenter in my district knows: measure twice, cut once. Figure out where it makes sense to cut before making those cuts. This is not efficiency. This is actually the opposite. I also wanted to mention the role that the Forest Service plays in research. They research how to fight pestilence that weakens our trees. They research which varieties of trees will survive best in fire. They also do research into which of these fire-prone areas is the most at risk so that they can treat those areas first. I just want to emphasize how important these Forest Service employees are to our district and the entire West, and really, frankly, the entire country. I'm going to talk a little bit in a moment about our Forest Service employees, some that I've spoken with since they were let go. But I first want to yield to my colleague, Andre Carson, for as much time as he may need to speak about the Forest Service cuts.
Thank you, Congresswoman Shire. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your friendship. And thank you for being an advocate on behalf of your constituents. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to demand answers on the recent funding and staff cuts to the U.S. Forest Service. Last week, I led a letter to the administration urging a reversal of these short-sighted decisions. We are still waiting for a response. In my district, a wonderful nonpartisan organization called Keep Indianapolis Beautiful has helped people and nature thrive. They work with local government, businesses, community groups, and schools to plant trees, clean up litter, and transform vacant lots into vibrant community green spaces. Mr. Speaker, they work so hard. Their work makes our neighborhoods healthier, safer, and more connected. But this administration terminated grants that made this great work possible. It appears that DOGE has flagged words like equity and diversity in grant applications, even when it's biodiversity and tree equity. That's just not bureaucratic overreach, it's absurd. Tree equity is the idea that every neighborhood deserves trees. Without them, underserved areas become heat islands, trapping heat and raising energy bills, and degrading quality of life. This is not theory, it's science. Investing in greener, healthier neighborhoods benefits Hoosiers and Americans. These cuts undermine that very goal. I urge the USDA to reverse its course, and I call on our colleagues to join us in demanding the restoration of these critical investments in our communities. I yield back. Thank you, Congresswoman.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to tell you something about the town of Roslyn in my district. It's a small town completely surrounded by forest, and this forest is at high risk for catastrophic wildfire. In fact, it was incredibly important to the residents of the town not only to fire-wise their own homes, but to treat the forest around the city to protect it. I actually got to go out with nonprofits and Forest Service employees, use that drip torch myself, and participate in prescribed fire in order to work to make sure that this area would not go up in flames and threaten the entire city. And it's this sort of work that some of the employees in my district who were fired were doing. They were protecting homes, protecting lives, and after years in the service, were let go. I even have constituents, a husband and a wife, both worked for the U.S. Forest Service. They were both let go, and they both did that work and trail maintenance and protected people during snow season in snow parks. These are year-round jobs, they're family-sustaining jobs, and these are people without whom we all suffer. I want to tell you about another worker who was fired from my district, actually working on harvesting timber. That timber is then sold and actually makes money for the federal government. But they were let go. I mean, that's not efficiency. It's definitely not saving taxpayer money. It's really beyond foolish, and it's emblematic of what this administration and Elon Musk have been doing. This is not government efficiency. It actually hampers the ability for the Forest Service to be efficient and to fulfill its mission. So taking a hatchet to these federal agencies across the board, labeling probationary employees as if they're in trouble for some reason, when really it just means they've been there devoting themselves to civil service for less than a year, that only causes harm, and it disparages them. That's why I was so proud to lead a letter with my Washington colleagues calling for Forest Service terminations to be rescinded and for the administration to halt any further cuts. This has disproportionately hit Washington State. I will continue fighting for the employees in my district, for the people in my district, for Washington State, to protect our forests, to fight these cuts, and to protect the U.S. Forest Service employees who have dedicated their lives to public service. I am now going to yield to my colleague from California, Dave Midd.
Thank you, Dr. Schreier. And Mr. Speaker, I rise today to urge the Trump administration to consider reversing its reckless and dangerous terminations of Forest Service employees. I represent an area in Orange County that is prone to the same types of wildfire risks that we saw devastate Los Angeles not too long ago. We're about a month or two away from fire season, and we have had a number of fires similar but smaller in scope to the one that just hit Los Angeles due to the Santa Ana winds that come through our area in Southern California every year, due to drier conditions because of climate change and droughts. And we know that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so we need to have these types of resources in place. As wildfires grow more and more intense, as the risks of wildfire become more and more ubiquitous, our firefighters are tired. They're understaffed, they're under-resourced, and underpaid. We need more funding to protect our communities from mega fires, but instead this administration is choosing to strip our key first responders in the U.S. Forest Service of resources that make us safe, that make millions of Americans, including the ones I represent in Orange County, safer. And let's be clear, if we're looking for efficiency, this is the opposite of efficiency. There's nothing efficient about firing essential public safety officials right before fire season. These are the people we deploy to try to clear the brush. They're the first responders who alert our forest fires, our fire departments of early onset wildfires before they become deadly multi-billion-dollar disasters. That's why we've rehired so many of the very same people that DOJ tried to fire in the first place due to the inefficiency, the gross incompetence of Elon Musk and the people that are working with him. This administration is also lying about retaining employees to help fight fires on the ground. Around 75% of those who were let go had firefighting experience, and now we're having to rehire some of them. This is what happens when you have 21-year-old hackers named Big Balls deciding how to cut our agencies as opposed to experts who know what they're doing. The incompetence of DOJ and Elon Musk is exposing Californians and millions of people around the country to unprecedented danger. We have to do something about it before it's too late. So I urge Congress to intervene, reverse these cuts, and stop this administration from putting more Americans in harm's way. I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, we've all talked about thinning forests, making them more resilient. We've talked about the risk of catastrophic wildfire. I also wanted to mention that we passed a big infrastructure bill a couple years ago, and part of that was not just protecting roads and bridges, it was also protecting our natural infrastructure because of its connection with our urban areas and the wildland-urban interface and more. And that involved more management of our forests, more thinning of our forests. It required more hiring up of Forest Service staff, which really emphasizes the point my colleagues have made about how this is doing the exact opposite. I wanted to connect a couple other dots for you, just to really bring home this point. President Trump promised all along the campaign trail that he was going to bring down costs for the American people. These are costs at the grocery store. These are costs everywhere, really. We could talk about tariffs, but what I really want to focus on, that's a big issue in my district and my state, is the cost of housing. Young people today cannot afford to buy a house, and that means they are going to struggle to build their nest egg for retirement. Well, one of the ways to bring down the cost of housing is to use that 8-inch diameter or smaller timber that you bring out of those national forests, that the Forest Service brings out, mill those, turn it into cross-laminated timber, mass produce walls, roofs, the building materials that you need to build houses quickly and cheaply. You can do rezoning, permitting for land to use for housing, and then you can build houses quickly, starter houses, houses to just help young people get their piece of America, their safeguard for their retirement. But this is doing the opposite. If we're not bringing the wood out of our forests, like the firefighter, the Forest Service employee I just told you about who lost her job, then we don't have that cross-laminated timber. And now what's happening? We're going to rely on Canada for timber at what? 25% surcharge because of these tariffs. This is doing the opposite. It is not bringing costs down for American families. It is driving costs up to the tune of close to $4,000 per family across this country. This is damaging. And then you add on what's happening in the Forest Service, and it just drives up the cost of housing. So in closing, I want to first just extend my gratitude to the people who step up to serve our country, who work for the U.S. Forest Service, who protect our forests, protect our homes, protect us from choking on smoke all summer long and now stretching into other seasons. I want to emphasize that it is important to use tax dollars wisely and to have an efficient government. But sometimes that means hiring up instead of firing, and certainly indiscriminate firing is crazy, wrong-headed, and reckless. So I want to once again object to these indiscriminate cuts, and I will yield back. And Mr. Speaker, I move that the House now do adjourn.
The gentlewoman yields back. The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until noon tomorrow.